Three teams of men attacked and murdered 132 people and counting in Paris this week. And even before that happened, it's not like the news was all joy and bliss. We've had week after week after week, month after month, really, of stories of racial injustice that have made it abundantly clear that racism is really in the mainstream of society. Something that those of us who've been in the progressive bubble were not really aware of. 43 lives were lost in Beirut. A Russian passenger jet was taken out of the sky by the same organization. It's been a disturbing moment, a fearful moment. And the question is, does the Christian voice have anything to say? Do voices of faith have anything to say in the midst of it? I'm reminded of September 16th, 2001, after the World Trade Center towers came down. People flocked to church. But within 3 or 4 weeks, attendance was not only down to normal, it was down to lower than it had been before. It's like we didn't say anything or give people anything at this moment of desperation and terror. I have that in mind as I preach this sermon, wondering, does the text before us have something? Does this letter from a radical rabbi in the first century have something that can speak to us at a moment that can somehow confront the rising human evil that we see around us? I think it does. I think it speaks to the heart. That's what Paul talks about in the passage we're going to discuss today. Talks about the heart. That's the organ, at least for him, that directs human cathectic energy, that life energy we have that's a gift to us that we use to make our life count for whatever it is that we choose. This is a matter of the heart that Paul is after. So let me begin by reading, beginning in the 15th verse of the first chapter. That's moving on in the letter for those of you who've been following these sermons. Paul says, I've heard of your faith in the Lord Jesus and your love toward all the saints. The saints would be those who live by faith. And for this reason, I do not cease to give thanks for you as I remember you in my prayers. And I pray that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the parent or father of glory, may give you a spirit of wisdom and revelation as you come to know God, so that with the eyes of your heart enlightened, you may know what is the hope to which God has called you. What are the riches of God's glorious inheritance among the saints, and what is the immeasurable greatness of God's power for those of us who trust or believe, according to the working of God's great power. I couldn't help it. The tears began to flow when I realized that they were okay. I have 2 close friends who live in Paris, and I'm really grateful to Facebook of all things, because when I turned on that safety tool that they had and saw the names of my 2 friends with little green marks beside them telling me that they were okay, I just burst into tears. The amount of suffering, though, that surrounded this event was extraordinary. Of course, this is part of the landscape of some people's lives. The fact that it was Paris kind of woke up the Western world in a way that Beirut did not. It's a troubling moment, and the thing is that over time, as I was watching the news, as I Skyped in and heard some of the sirens in Paris, after a while, your heart begins to numb and your vision begins to narrow. I got this sense that that's what was happening. It's almost like you had to make an effort to reach into those tears again, into the fear that that was emerging in the midst of terror. My friend Mark says that we go numb in a situation like that because there's a big gap between the pain we feel and our ability to heal the pain. And so with narrowed visions, I start to hear politicians and pundits, understandably frustrated and angry, calling for direct confrontation, calling for aggressive moves against ISIS. Certainly understandable, the Prime Minister of France, I think, talked about annihilating the enemies of the Republic. And while I get the emotion and I understand the place from which it comes, I'm concerned that if we do that, I'm afraid that we're going to reduce our own humanity. I'm concerned that if we operate in a way that's completely destructive, we're going to reduce our humanity. We're going to come to another one of those moments when we try to make distinctions that aren't distinctions between torture and enhanced interrogation techniques. We'll continue to limit civil liberties to the point that we begin to be afraid of the people around us. Reduce trust as freedom is reduced. It's an extraordinarily complex problem that we're dealing with. Hardly know what to do with ISIS. It's a multi-headed monster that reaches out in secret. We don't know what to do with the enormity of the fact that 60 million lives have been displaced in the midst of this world war. And I'm not sure what we're going to do in the future with the fact that there's an enormous amount of trauma in people's lives that just is going to dance around between the amygdala and the hippocampus until years from now. In a child now, it could erupt into enormous violence later. I'm concerned that we will reduce our humanity if we move forward in the kind of aggressive way, trying to destroy that which is in our path. On September 16th, 2001, sermons said one of two things usually. One was saying that God is with us and we need to make an aggressive response. And the other thing they tended to say was they tended to be self-reflective about the way that America, in that case, but the West in general, has treated people who are different than them. It was a question of whether or not there'd been justice. So either implicitly or explicitly, there was a tendency to blame the victim. And would I counsel that here? Or even then? No. No, because even though we've not been perfect, I wouldn't want to claim that at all. The level of depravity here, the depth of the human problem, of this matrix of hatred and violence, this is a different order of things. It's not merely a response to something that we've done or not done in the West. It's a deep and profound human failure. And the question is, how are we going to confront it? How do we confront it? Counter it? And it comes in the heart. I think the basic way to confront this is we need more people who live with hearts open, trusting the presence of a creative and powerful God. The part of us that directs our cathectic energies, our efforts, and our own creativity need to live trusting or believing in a God that has the capacity to bring new life out of something that's desperate and awful. Trusting in a God that can live beyond our imaginations. We need more people of faith. Now, I know that faith is something that's gone a little out of style. And, we still have faith as long as we exhausted all our human resources, then we can pray to God. But I'm not talking about that kind of faith. I'm talking about a heart that is changed by a basic attitude of trust in the presence and the power of a creative God. Now, I'm of course speaking in a Christian context, but I'm not suggesting that Christianity is the only faith, the only structure where we can live a life of that kind of faith. Other religions, many religions, have fabric and structure that people can live within that do lead them to such a life where the heart is directed towards a God of creative love and power. Islam certainly is a religion that can do that. I mean, obviously not this radicalized, fundamentalist version of Islam. But to be clear, the radicalized, fundamentalist version of Christianity isn't exactly a picnic. No, we're looking for people of faith that can rely on the nature of God to bring new life out of death. I'm not talking about a magic God either. I'm reminded of what I guess amounts to the first ecological crisis on planet Earth, when there were a bacterium that had developed an early ability to use a photosynthetic process that took carbon dioxide and turned it into oxygen as part of the fueling process of the growth of the bacterium. And they did such a good job. They were able to proliferate so well that they filled the air with oxygen. And they were just choking themselves off as the carbon dioxide diminished. The first ecological crisis, there really wasn't anything in their resources. They didn't know, quote unquote, what to do. But there was something in the nature of things that was carrying creation forward. Because as these bacterium were colliding and trying to get the most of the resources that existed in the planet, slowly but surely, nucleated cells started to evolve out of those bacterium. And the nucleated cells were using the oxygen and putting carbon dioxide back into the air. And so after a time, there was a balance. It was the beginning of animal life, this balance between plant and animal life that lives in our planet now. I mean, that's just beyond the imagination at that point. That's in the nature of things, that there is a God that is able to take moments and provide a novel answer that is outside the obvious answers that we might see. That's the kind of faith I'm talking about, trusting in a God that can do that, so that as we confront this deep human fissure, we can open our hearts and let our energies be directed towards an answer that we yet can't imagine. Now, will that mean we do not confront ISIS with force? I doubt it. I think that evil needs to be confronted with force. But there's a difference between trying to annihilate something and destroy something, and trying to build something up, working towards an eventual hope, an eventual new solution that is more beautiful than we can possibly imagine. We need more people whose hearts are open to faith, who are looking for that kind of an answer and acting in that direction. We need more people sharing with their friends and neighbors that this is what we're called to. Because people of faith have that spirit that seeks God's wisdom. And what Paul says is that as you do that and your heart is enlightened, you discover the hope, you discover that novel moment that you've been called to. You discover the work that you have to do. And as all of us do that together, as all of us seek that God of creative love and power, that's when the next thing emerges. That's when the new hope is there, and that's how we confront what's before us. We need more people of faith. Not people fighting about faith. Not people relying on magic. People whose hearts are open and courageous, willing to take risks for what might emerge next. Because that's the hope. If we rely simply on our own resources, we cycle down. If we rely on the resources of the God of creation, well, then we begin to see the immeasurable greatness of the creative power of God.